The sun's scorched horizon wavered like a mirage as Delilah Nolan's water broke beneath the canvas of her weathered Conestoga wagon. It was 1873, and the harsh Wyoming Territory offered no mercy, not even to a woman in labor whose husband lay buried 3 days' ride back, victim of a rattlesnake strike that left her a widow at 22. "Lord have mercy," she gasped, gripping the wagon's wooden frame as another contraction seized her body. The small caravan she'd joined after burying Thomas had stopped for the night, but the others, mostly miners and fortune-seekers, kept their distance from the pregnant widow, superstitious about death and birth alike. Delilah bit down on a strip of leather as pain radiated through her body. She'd been traveling west to reach her cousin in Sacramento when tragedy struck. Now she was alone, bringing a child into the world beneath a wagon in the vast wilderness. "Madam, you all right under there?" A deep voice startled her, followed by the appearance of a man's face peering beneath the wagon. His features were weathered but kind, topped with a worn Stetson. "The baby," she managed between gritted teeth. "It's coming." The stranger's eyes widened before his expression settled into calm resolve. "I'll fetch Mrs. Holloway from the third wagon. She's helped with birthing before." Before Delilah could respond, he disappeared. Minutes later, a gray-haired woman with capable hands crawled under the wagon alongside him. "I'm Martha Holloway," the woman said, assessing the situation with practiced efficiency. "And this here's Mitchell Thornton, who found you. Looks like this little one's not waiting for proper accommodations." For the next 2 hours, Delilah fought through the pain with Mrs. Holloway's guidance and the unexpected assistance of Mitchell Thornton, who fetched water, held Delilah's hand when she needed to push, and maintained a steady stream of encouragement. His blue eyes never wavered, even when other men would have turned away. When the newborn's cries finally pierced the night, Delilah collapsed back against the bundles of clothing she'd fashioned into a makeshift pillow. "You have a son, Mrs. Nolan," Martha announced, cleaning and wrapping the infant in a piece of clean linen. Mitchell gazed down at the tiny red-faced infant in wonder. "Born beneath a wagon in the middle of nowhere," he murmured, then looked directly at Delilah. "That's a tough start for a boy, but I promise you this he'll grow up under my roof if you'll let me help." No child should face the trail without protection. Delilah's exhausted mind could barely comprehend his words. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know enough," Mitchell replied, his voice gentle but firm. "I've got a homestead 3 days' ride from here. Good land, sturdy cabin. Been working it alone for 2 years now." He removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair. "I'm not proposing marriage to a woman who just lost her husband, but I am offering safety for you and your boy until you decide what you want." Martha Holloway nodded approvingly. "Mitchell's a good man, Mrs. Nolan. Known him since he came through these parts. If I were in your position, I'd consider his offer carefully." As Delilah looked from her newborn son's face to the weathered, honest features of the cowboy who'd appeared like an angel of mercy, she realized she had no real choice. Her cousin in Sacramento was merely an acquaintance, and she had no money, no protection, and now a baby to care for. "I accept your help, Mr. Thornton," she said finally, "but only until I can make proper arrangements for my son and myself." Mitchell nodded, replacing his hat. "That's fair. We'll head to my place once you're fit to travel." He looked at the baby again, and a smile softened his face. "What will you call him?" Delilah gazed at her son, thinking of the husband she'd lost and the uncertain future ahead. "William, after my father." "William Nolan," Mitchell said, testing the name. "A good, strong name for a boy born under the stars." 3 days later, Delilah sat propped in Mitchell's wagon as they approached his homestead. The journey had been slow and careful, with Mitchell insisting on frequent stops for her to rest and tend to William. Throughout the journey, she'd observed the cowboy, his gentle handling of the horses, his vigilance against potential dangers, and his surprising knowledge of caring for an infant. "My sister had 3 little ones before the fever took her," he explained when she commented on his skill in helping calm William's cries. "I helped when I could." Mitchell's homestead came into view as they crested a rise, a sturdy log cabin with a corral for horses, a small barn, and the beginnings of fenced fields. Smoke rose from the stone chimney. "Someone's there," Delilah said with alarm. "That'll be Josiah," Mitchell explained. "My neighbor who checks on the place when I'm gone. Good man." As they approached, an older man with a silver beard emerged from the cabin. He waved, then looked puzzled at the sight of Delilah and the baby. "Found myself some unexpected traveling companions," Mitchell called out as they drew closer. After introductions were made and their unusual circumstances explained, Josiah helped bring Delilah's few belongings inside while Mitchell carried William. The cabin was simple but well built, with one main room containing a table, chairs, a stone fireplace, and a small kitchen area. A ladder led to what Mitchell explained was a loft where he slept. A separate small bedroom was through a door on the far wall. "You and the boy will take the bedroom," Mitchell said firmly when Delilah began to protest. "I'll use the loft." That night, after Josiah had departed with promises to return with his wife the next day, Delilah sat by the fire nursing William while Mitchell prepared a simple stew. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "Taking in strangers, giving up your bedroom, it's more than simple kindness." Mitchell was quiet for a long moment as he stirred the pot. "Maybe I know what it's like to be alone in this country," he said finally. "I came out here after the war with nothing but nightmares and a bad leg. Found that building something, creating instead of destroying, helped heal things inside me." He glanced at her. "When I saw you and that baby under that wagon, I figured maybe helping you both might be part of that same healing." His honesty left Delilah speechless. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt the faintest spark of hope that she might find her way forward. As days turned to weeks, Delilah and William settled into life at Mitchell's homestead. She insisted on contributing by taking over the cooking, cleaning, and eventually tending a small vegetable garden Mitchell helped her establish. William thrived in the stable environment, growing stronger each day. Mitchell proved to be a man of his word, respectful of her mourning and never presuming beyond the arrangement they'd agreed upon. Still, Delilah found herself watching him, the way his face softened when he held William, the quiet competence with which he handled every aspect of running the homestead, the sound of his deep voice reading from one of his few books in the evenings. Spring warmed into summer, and Delilah's grief began to ease. Thomas had been a good man, but their marriage had been one of convenience more than passion, an arrangement between families that had grown into affection, but never the deep love she'd read about in novels. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, William asleep in a cradle Mitchell had crafted, Delilah broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. "I should be making plans to move on," she said softly. "I've imposed on your generosity for nearly 4 months now." Mitchell was silent for so long she thought he might not have heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Is that what you want, to leave?" "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted, watching the golden light fade from the hills. "I thought I was heading to Sacramento because that was the plan Thomas and I had made, but now William is here and plans change," Mitchell finished for her. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I won't pretend I want you to leave, Delilah, this place. It's been different with you and William here, better." He looked away as if embarrassed by the admission. "But I understand if you need to make your own way." Delilah studied his profile, seeing the tension in his jaw. "And if we stayed, what would that look like?" Mitchell's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "However you want it to. You could have the cabin to yourselves. I could build another small place nearby. Or—" he hesitated, then seemed to find his courage. "Or we could consider a more permanent arrangement, in time, when you're ready." The implication hung in the air between them, neither rushing to fill the silence that followed. "I think," Delilah said carefully, "that William and I might stay a while longer, to see what might develop." The smile that spread across Mitchell's face made her heart beat faster than it had in a very long time. Summer faded into autumn, and with the changing season came changes to their living arrangement. Mitchell and Josiah added a room to the cabin, giving them all more space. Delilah took William to the small town of Ridgeline 20 miles away and returned with fabric, sewing supplies, and a determination to make the cabin more homelike. By the time the first snow fell, the cabin had curtains on the windows, rag rugs on the floors, and the unmistakable feeling of a home rather than just a shelter. William was crawling now, exploring every corner and delighting in Mitchell's attention. Their relationship had evolved too, with small, careful steps. The first time Mitchell took her hand as they walked to check on a new calf had felt momentous. The first time he kissed her a gentle, questioning touch after returning from a 3-day trip to buy supplies had left them both trembling. "I'm falling in love with you," he confessed that night as they sat by the fire. "I've tried to give you time and space to grieve, but I need you to know how I feel." Delilah's heart raced. "I think I've been falling in love with you since you found me under that wagon," she admitted. "It scared me at first, seemed disloyal to Thomas. But what I feel for you is different than anything I've felt before." Their courtship progressed with the sweet anticipation of two people who were building something precious together. Mitchell was patient and considerate, always conscious of her feelings and William's needs. When Christmas approached, Mitchell disappeared into his workshop for hours at a time, emerging with sawdust in his hair but refusing to tell her what he was making. On Christmas morning, after they'd exchanged modest gifts, he brought out a rocking chair perfectly sized for her, carved with delicate patterns of flowers along the arms. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "There's something else," Mitchell said, his voice suddenly nervous as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved wooden box. Inside lay a simple gold band. "I know it hasn't been a full year since you lost Thomas," he said quietly, "and I'll wait longer if you need me to. But I love you, Delilah. I love William like he's my own son. I want us to be a real family." Tears filled Delilah's eyes as she looked from the ring to Mitchell's hopeful face. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her with more passion than he'd ever allowed himself to show. They were married on New Year's Day of 1874 in the town of Ridgeline, with Josiah and his wife Martha serving as witnesses, and William, now 8 months old, watching curiously from Martha's arms. "Are you sure you want to take on another man's child as your own?" Delilah asked Mitchell the night before their wedding, voicing the worry that had lingered despite his consistent care for William. Mitchell looked at her with surprise. "William became mine the moment I saw him born under that wagon," he said firmly. "Blood doesn't make a father, Delilah. Love does." Life as the Thornton family settled into a rhythm of hard work and simple joys. Mitchell taught Delilah to ride and shoot, insisting she needed to be able to protect herself and William when he was away. Delilah surprised herself with her aptitude for both, earning Mitchell's proud smile when she hit a target at 50 paces. William grew from a baby to a toddler, sturdy and adventurous, following Mitchell everywhere and calling him Pa without prompting. Mitchell's face, the first time he heard the word, held such raw emotion that Delilah had to turn away to hide her tears. Their happiness was tested when a harsh winter storm struck in February, trapping Mitchell in ridgeline for over a week. Delilah managed the homestead alone, keeping fires burning, animals fed, and William entertained while fighting back the fear that Mitchell might not make it home. When he finally appeared, half frozen but alive, she ran to him through knee-deep snow. William bundled against her chest. "I thought I'd lost you," she sobbed as his cold arms encircled them both. "Never," he promised, his voice hoarse. "I'll always come back to you both." That night, after William was asleep and Mitchell had warmed by the fire, their lovemaking held a desperate edge, a reaffirmation that they were together and alive despite the wilderness that sometimes threatened to take everything. Spring brought new challenges and joys. Delilah discovered she was expecting a child, and Mitchell's reaction, dropping to his knees to press his ear against her still flat stomach, made her laugh through happy tears. "William will have a brother or sister," he marveled, looking up at her with wonder. "Does it matter which?" She asked, curious about his preference. "Not a bit," he assured her, rising to his feet to kiss her. "Healthy is all I care about, healthy mother, healthy baby." As Delilah's pregnancy progressed, Mitchell became increasingly protective, hiring a young man named Patrick to help with the heavier work around the homestead. Delilah alternated between appreciation and frustration at his hovering. "I'm with child, not made of glass," she reminded him one afternoon when he tried to take a basket of laundry from her hands. "Humor me," Mitchell said with a sheepish smile. "I wasn't there for the beginning with William. I aim to do everything right this time." How could she argue with that? Instead, she let him take the basket and pulled him down for a kiss that left them both breathless. Summer brought visitors, a wagon train of settlers heading farther west, who camped near the creek that ran through Mitchell's land. Among them was a doctor who, upon learning of Delilah's condition, offered to examine her. "Everything looks to be progressing normally," he assured them. "The baby should arrive in early autumn." The settlers moved on, but their brief presence reminded Delilah of how isolated their life was. "Do you ever miss being around more people?" she asked Mitchell that night. He considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember the noise and the arguments and the politics of town life, and I'm grateful for our peace here." He touched her cheek gently. "Are you lonely, Delilah?" "No," she said truthfully. "But I do worry about William and this new baby growing up so far from other children." Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "Josiah mentioned that his nephew is thinking of settling nearby with his family. They have 3 young ones. And Ridgeline is growing. There's talk of a proper school starting next year." The conversation planted a seed that they returned to frequently over the coming weeks, the balance between self-sufficiency and community, and what would be best for their growing family. In late September, as the leaves began to turn, Delilah went into labor. Unlike William's birth beneath the wagon, this time she was in a proper bed with Mitchell at her side and Martha Holloway overseeing everything with calm efficiency. "You're doing wonderfully," Mitchell encouraged, wiping her brow with a cool cloth as she worked through contractions. William, now almost 2 years old, was being entertained by Josiah in the main room of the cabin, his occasional laughter providing a counterpoint to Delilah's labor pains. After 6 hours, their daughter entered the world with a powerful cry that made Mitchell laugh through his tears. "She's got your spirit," he told Delilah as Martha placed the swaddled infant in her arms. "And your lungs," Delilah teased weakly, gazing down at their daughter's red, indignant face. "Hello," Emma rose. They'd agreed on the name months before, Emma for Mitchell's mother and Rose for the wildflowers that had been blooming when they married. Mitchell sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Delilah's shoulders as they both marveled at their daughter. A soft knock at the door was followed by Josiah appearing with William in his arms. "Someone wants to meet his sister," Josiah said with a smile. Mitchell took William and settled him carefully beside Delilah on the bed. The toddler peered curiously at the baby. "Baby?" he asked, looking to Mitchell for confirmation. "That's right, son. This is your sister, Emma." William considered this information seriously, then gently patted the bundle. "My Emma," he declared. Delilah met Mitchell's gaze over their children's heads, her eyes full of tears and joy. This moment, this family they had created from the most unexpected beginning, felt like a miracle. As Emma grew from newborn to infant, the Thornton family settled into their new rhythm. Delilah recovered her strength quickly, but Mitchell insisted on taking on more of the household duties to allow her time with both children. "I never thought I'd see the day a cowboy would be so handy with a washboard," Josiah joked during one of his visits, watching Mitchell scrubbing clothes while William helped by splashing water everywhere. "A man does what needs doing for his family," Mitchell replied without embarrassment. The war and its aftermath had stripped him of any concern for traditional roles. Survival and happiness were what mattered now. The winter of 1874-1875 was milder than the previous year, allowing for more regular trips to Ridgeline. On one such visit in January, they discovered that the town had grown considerably, with new businesses opening and more families settling in the area. "They're starting construction on the schoolhouse next month," Martha Holloway informed them as they shared coffee in her kitchen. "Should be ready by autumn." Mitchell and Delilah exchanged a look, both thinking of their earlier conversations about community for their children. On the ride home, Mitchell broached the subject. "What would you think about building a new house closer to town?" "Not in town. I still want our land and privacy, but maybe halfway between our current place and Ridgeline." Delilah considered the idea. "You'd give up the homestead you've worked so hard on." "I'd keep the land," he clarified. "Maybe hire someone to work it or use it for grazing. But I've been thinking about what you said about the children needing others around them as they grow." He glanced back at William, who was sleeping in the wagon bed beside baby Emma's basket. "I want them to have every advantage we can give them." The love she felt for this man who had evolved from the lonely cowboy who found her beneath a wagon to this thoughtful, devoted father overwhelmed her for a moment. "I think it's a wonderful idea," she said finally. "A new home for our family's future." Spring brought the beginning of their new project. Mitchell purchased land 7 miles from Ridgeline, close enough for William to eventually attend school, but far enough to maintain the independence they both valued. With Josiah's help and hired workers from town, they began building a larger, more modern home with proper bedrooms for the children, a spacious kitchen for Delilah, and even a small study where Mitchell could manage the increasing paperwork of his growing cattle business. Delilah threw herself into planning the details of their new home while continuing to manage their current household. William was talking in full sentences now, asking endless questions about the new house and when baby Emma would be big enough to play with him properly. "Patience, son," Mitchell would say, tousling the boy's dark hair so like Delilah's. "Your sister will be running after you before you know it." By autumn, their new home was complete, a handsome 2-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides and windows that caught the morning and evening light. Moving day was a community event, with neighbors from miles around coming to help transport furniture and belongings, followed by a celebration that lasted well into the evening. As Delilah stood on their new porch that night, watching Mitchell swing William in circles while their neighbors clapped and laughed, Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms, she marveled at how far they'd come from that desperate night beneath the wagon. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Thornton," Mitchell said, joining her on the porch with a sleepy William on his hip. "I was just thinking how life takes unexpected turns," she replied, leaning into his side. 2 years ago, I was alone and frightened, giving birth under a wagon with no idea what the future held. Mitchell kissed her temple. "And now," she looked up at him, at the love shining clearly in his eyes, "now I have everything I never knew I wanted." Their new location brought changes beyond just proximity to town. Mitchell's cattle business flourished with better access to markets, and Delilah found herself part of a growing community of women who shared resources, knowledge, and friendship. William started attending the new school in Ridgeline when he turned 5, riding there on a gentle pony Mitchell had trained especially for him. Emma, now 3, would stand at the window watching her brother leave each morning, impatiently counting the days until she could join him. "She's got your determination," Mitchell commented one morning, watching Emma stubbornly practicing her letters at the kitchen table. "And your focus," Delilah countered, smiling as their daughter's tongue poked out in concentration. Life wasn't without challenges. A dry summer in 1878 threatened their cattle and crops, forcing Mitchell to make difficult decisions about selling stock and conserving resources. Delilah contracted a fever that winter that left them all terrified before she finally recovered. Through each trial, their partnership grew stronger. Mitchell never forgot his promise to the woman he'd found beneath the wagon that her son would grow up under his roof, protected and loved. William, now 7, bore no resemblance to the tiny infant born in such precarious circumstances. He was tall for his age, with Delilah's dark hair and quick mind, but many of his mannerisms mirrored Mitchell's, the way he stood with feet planted firmly, his thoughtful consideration before speaking, his instinctive protectiveness toward Emma. "He's becoming more like you every day," Delilah observed one evening as they watched William patiently showing Emma how to tie a special knot Mitchell had taught him. "He's becoming himself," Mitchell corrected gently. "That's all I've ever wanted for him, for both of them." In the spring of 1880, as they prepared to celebrate Mitchell and Delilah's 6th wedding anniversary, an unexpected letter arrived from Sacramento. It was from Delilah's cousin Rebecca, the one she had been traveling to meet when fate intervened. "She's passing through Wyoming next month and wants to visit," Delilah told Mitchell, her expression conflicted. "I haven't seen her since I was 16. Mitchell studied his wife's face. "Do you want to see her now?" Delilah considered the question. "I do," she decided. "She's my only remaining family from before, and I'd like William and Emma to know that part of their history too." When Rebecca's visit arrived, it brought a strange collision of Delilah's past and present. Her cousin was fashionably dressed and full of stories about Sacramento society, curious about the life Delilah had built in Wyoming. "I can hardly believe it," Rebecca said as they sat on the porch watching Mitchell teaching William to throw a lariat while Emma danced around them. "When you didn't arrive in Sacramento, I feared the worst. To think you were building this life all along." "It wasn't the plan," Delilah admitted, "but sometimes life gives you what you need rather than what you think you want." Rebecca stayed for a week, gradually shedding her city airs and even joining Mitchell and Delilah for a day's ride to see the original homestead, which they still maintained. "This is where it all began," Delilah explained as they approached the cabin where she'd first lived with Mitchell. "Where William took his first steps, where Mitchell proposed," "It's a beautiful story," Rebecca said thoughtfully, "like something from a novel." On their final evening together, after the children were asleep, Rebecca asked the question Delilah had been expecting. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you'd made it to Sacramento as planned?" Delilah looked at Mitchell, who was giving them space for their conversation but remained within sight, tending to the horses in the corral. "I used to in those early days," she admitted. "But not anymore. This life with Mitchell, with our children, it's where I belong. I can't imagine any other path now." As the years passed, their family continued to flourish. William grew into a thoughtful, capable young man who helped Mitchell manage their expanding ranch operations. Emma developed into a spirited girl with her father's practical nature and her mother's quick wit. When William turned 16 in 1889, Mitchell took him aside for a conversation he'd been planning for years. "I've never kept the circumstances of your birth a secret from you," he said as they rode the boundaries of the ranch together. "You know Thomas Nolan was your blood father." William nodded, his expression serious. "And you're the father who raised me." Mitchell's throat tightened at the simple statement. "I've had papers drawn up," he continued. "Formal adoption papers. I should have done it years ago, but—" He trailed off, uncharacteristically uncertain. "But what?" William prompted. "But I wanted it to be your choice, once you were old enough to understand what it meant. You bear the Nolan name. If you want to keep it to honor the man who gave you life, I would understand." William was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the land they'd worked together for as long as he could remember. "I've been William Nolan for 16 years, he said finally. "But I've been your son from the day I was born. I'd be proud to take your name, Pa." Mitchell's eyes filled with tears as he clasped William's shoulder. "You've been my son in every way that matters since the moment I found your mother beneath that wagon. The name is just making official what's been true all along." When they returned home and shared the news with Delilah and Emma, there were tears and embraces all around. The family celebration that followed with William Thornton, officially recognized as Mitchell's son, felt like the completion of a circle that had begun 17 years earlier on that fateful night. As they prepared for bed that night, Delilah found Mitchell standing at their bedroom window, looking out at the starlit sky. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sliding her arms around his waist and resting her head against his back. "About how sometimes the most important journeys in life are the ones we never plan to take," he said, turning to embrace her properly. "If I hadn't decided to join that wagon train, if you hadn't lost Thomas, if William hadn't chosen that precise moment to enter the world." "So many ifs," Delilah murmured. "But they all led us here," Mitchell continued, cupping her face in his hands. "To this life we've built together, to our family." "To love," Delilah added, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "To love," Mitchell agreed, holding her close as they stood bathed in starlight, the same stars that had witnessed their beginning all those years ago, when a baby was born beneath a wagon, and a cowboy made a promise that changed all their lives forever. In the years that followed, William did indeed grow up under Mitchell's roof, and then built a home of his own nearby when he married Mary Callahan, the daughter of Ridgeline's doctor, in 1895. Emma followed her brother's example 4 years later, marrying James Foster, a young lawyer who'd come west to establish a practice in the growing town. Mitchell and Delilah found themselves at the center of an expanding family circle, with grandchildren arriving to fill their home with laughter and new memories. William's firstborn son, named Mitchell Thomas, in honor of both his grandfathers, especially delighted the elder Mitchell, who spent hours teaching the boy all the skills he'd once taught William. "It's like watching history repeat itself," Delilah commented one afternoon, watching her husband and grandson repairing a fence together. Their movements almost identical, despite the 60 years separating them. "Some histories are worth repeating," Mitchell replied with a wink. His hair now silver but his eyes as bright and loving as they'd been on the day he'd found her. In 1903, on the 30th anniversary of their meeting, Mitchell and Delilah returned to the spot where the wagon train had camped that fateful night. The landscape had changed, a small settlement had grown nearby, and the trail was now a proper road, but the big cottonwood tree that had sheltered Delilah's wagon still stood. "I was so afraid that night," Delilah remembered, standing beneath its branches. Alone in labor, no idea what the future held. Mitchell took her hand, his touch as reassuring now as it had been 3 decades ago. "And I had no idea when I looked under that wagon that I'd find everything I never knew I was looking for." Their love story, born in crisis, nurtured through hardship, and blossoming into a legacy that would continue through their children and grandchildren, had become something of a legend in Ridgeline. The tale of the widow who gave birth beneath a wagon and the cowboy who promised her son would grow up under his roof was told and retold, a reminder of how the harsh realities of frontier life could sometimes forge the most enduring bonds. When Mitchell passed away peacefully in 1910, at the age of 73, with Delilah holding his hand and their children and grandchildren gathered around, his last words were a reflection of the gratitude that had defined his life since that night in 1873. "Best thing I ever did," he whispered to Delilah, "was look under that wagon." Delilah lived another 7 years, remaining in the house they had built together, surrounded by family and the memories of their shared life.